Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, January the 6th, 2026. Today there is a conjunction between the Sun and Venus. This conjunction has been brewing for some time, but now it is exact. And in this video, I want to talk about this conjunction in some detail. But before I talk about this aspect, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time on Tuesday. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as this chart is concerned, at noon today New York time, the moon is at 0 degrees Virgo. So New York time, first part of the day, the moon is in Leo, and then it moves into Virgo. So what that means is we lose our fire. So we did have this one planet, the moon, in a fast sign, and maybe you regard it as a satellite and not a planet, but astrologically we like to generalize by calling everything a planet, at least the Sun through to Saturn, and of course Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. So we lose that fire, and so there is nothing in a fast sign, and it might feel that something is missing. That we thought things were happening, we were making connections, there seemed to be a certain spark, and now that's all gone. And there may be a feeling that things are just ever so slightly deflated. And of course, it's January the 6th. January the 6th, it's over. I mean, I think there was a sort of a tradition or a superstition in the UK that today is the day you have to take down your Christmas decorations. That if you leave your Christmas decorations up beyond January the 6th, well, that could be unfortunate. But hopefully, if you are in the UK, you have taken your Christmas decorations down by now. So that's something you should perhaps be working on. But of course, I'm being superstitious here. So we do have the moon moving into Virgo. Of course, we can say the usual stuff about Virgo, moon moving into an earth sign. Now there are 5 personal planets in Virgo. Indeed, all the in earth signs. Now all the 5 personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, they're all in an earth sign. And so you could say that there is something very earthy and grounded about today. And if we throw in Uranus as well, that's 6 planets in earth signs. Uranus it's not a personal planet, it's not a social planet, but in my experience Uranus is of more impact than Neptune and Pluto. So I think that is a change to consider. Now, the moon, just before it moves into Virgo, by the way, if you're in Europe, for example, the moon will move into Virgo late afternoon, early evening. In London, I think it moves in at sort of 4:57 p.m., 3 minutes to 5. It'll be just before 6 o'clock in the evening if you're in continental Europe. I don't know, for example, Rome or Paris or Berlin. And so we have that. And so the moon, just before it moves into Virgo, does make a trine to Chiron. That's right at the beginning of the day. And trine to Chiron, it could be about our desire in the final moments to just do something, be something, trying to show off our individuality, a final spark before the moon changes sign. And then the moon makes a square to Uranus. So kind of a similar message there. There is a certain similarity between Chiron and Uranus. There can be, about wanting to be different. So moon squaring Uranus just before it moves into before the moon moves into Virgo, again, perhaps wanting to do something differently, and perhaps other people wanting to do things differently, and it's important to respect other people's individuality. And we also have a Sun conjunct Venus. Now, I will be talking in some detail about Sun conjunct Venus, at the end of the video. But this conjunction between the Sun and Venus, it's where is it? It's at around 10 degrees. Sorry, 16 Capricorn. So this conjunction, it's not necessarily a good thing. Some would say it was a good thing because it's cazimi. When the Sun is exactly conjunct Uranus. Sorry, when the Sun is exactly conjunct a planet, supposedly that planet benefits from the Sun being so close. It's like you're on the same wavelength as the flames, and maybe during that window when you are on the same wavelength as the flames, you can't be burnt. Maybe, I mean, that's a nice way of looking at it, Kazimi. You are strengthened by the Sun, but I don't buy that at all. I think no, I don't. That's a generalization. I understand that there is a tradition in astrology that a planet is strengthened by extreme proximity to the Sun. I'm talking about 17 arc minutes, like we have today. But there just could be a sense in which the Venus principle is burnt out, and that might be a particular problem in a female chart. So I would have said that women are more likely to be negatively impacted by Sun conjunct Venus from men, because Venus is a female planet. There may be news about a particular woman in the news. Who is the woman in the news? So there are some thoughts there about Sun conjunct Venus, and Venus can be about aesthetics and what things look like. And so if Sun is conjunct Venus, you could associate that with passing ugliness or something not looking as good as it should do. But I'll be talking about this Sun conjunct Venus later in the video. So that's what's going on today, and that's set for New York. So if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia. So here it is, January the 6th, noon, Sydney. The moon is at 20 degrees Leo. So what this means is that if you are in Sydney, Australia, the moon does not move into Virgo today. It's in Leo all day long. And so the main aspect is arguably moon trine Chiron, or perhaps moon square Uranus. So the moon is void. So if you are in Sydney, Australia, maybe there's not so much going on. The moon is relatively weak in Leo. I mean, it has its strengths in Virgo because the moon rules the earth signs by night. But with the moon in Leo, maybe there isn't so much going on. But moon square Uranus, the end of the day. Well, even the end of the day, I don't think the moon makes that square to Uranus right at the end of the day. So maybe it's all about moon trine Chiron. And so if you are in Australasia, maybe there's just something you want to demonstrate. You want to show that you are a free thinker. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the center of the solar system. So when you've got a heliocentric, so when you've got a geocentric conjunction involving the Sun, that is shown as an opposition heliocentrically. So we've got Sun conjunct Venus geocentrically, but we've got Earth conjunct Earth opposition Venus heliocentrically. And I think that heliocentric opposition between Earth and Venus kind of gives us a different view of the Sun-Venus relationship. Well, now it's an Earth-Venus relationship, and it could be a feeling of being somewhat estranged, feeling that we're not really part of things. You imagine the solar system, you've got the Sun in the middle, and then you've got Earth on one side of the Sun, Venus on the other side of the Sun, because you think of Venus and Earth being quite close to each other, but not if they're on opposite sides of the Sun. So that might mean that finding oneness with things, getting on with people, just might be a bit difficult with that Earth-Venus opposition. And maybe when people get emotional or try to be emotional, it doesn't really hit the right note. And so, we perhaps want to keep our distance, or maybe other people want to keep their distance. And so perhaps that's how some of us might experience an Earth opposition Venus. It might also just be about what's happening on this planet. Maybe just people find it difficult to get on with each other. And we shouldn't forget that the Earth is starting to move also to an opposition of Mars, because, we've got Sun conjunct Venus. Really, we've got Sun conjunct Mars as well. So Earth opposition Mars is quite an angry aspect. And so I'm not saying that we're going to find a lot of harmony today. I think that there's a possibility that the differences between people do become very clear. So now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, January the 6th, 2026. So as far as what's happening today, well, let's go through the 12 signs. Aries. Aries, you are feeling that things are changing. Changing in a way that, to begin with, may not seem entirely satisfactory. It may be that, you were really keen to get going on things. You had ideas, and then as the day progresses, you might experience a slowdown. That there isn't so much action, and you'd like to get things together, but it's just not working out, and you might be quite impatient, because of that. And so, what do you do? Well, it's true, as I've been saying, almost ad nauseum, that you do have these 4 planets in Capricorn, and really it is a time, Aries, for you to be successful and to really push your agenda as much as possible. In a broad sense, while these planets are in Capricorn, certainly during the first half of January, but as you move through January, there are going to be different experiences on different days and different emphases. And at the moment, Aries, there are probably things that just need to be sorted out. Things that perhaps aren't very clear, and you need to make sure that it's all resolved. And so that is something I think that you can do and that you should do. And so, don't think that everything can be finished off. And perhaps you also need to look back. What have you done? Has it been good enough? Maybe it hasn't been good enough. And maybe something needs to be gone over, one more time, because, perhaps mistakes have been made and you've been in a hurry to move on to the next stage. But now, as the moon moves into Virgo, you're having another look at things and you're thinking, well, this isn't perfect. You could perhaps have done a better job. And it applies not just to yourself, but also how you evaluate other people. I think that you are going to want things to be done well, or not at all. So, don't worry if things take longer than expected. And if you feel you're being a bit obsessive, don't worry, there is a place for being obsessive. And, you don't want to start 2026 off on the wrong note. And, also, we do have this Sun conjunct Venus, and Sun conjunct Venus can say something about other people, and perhaps other people have to be accommodated to an extent. You have to be aware that sometimes people make mistakes. People can't be perfect all the time, and they do things which aren't properly thought through. And so you might find that some people are very sure of themselves. They don't seem to leave any room for doubt, and so it's tempting to believe them. But People who are very sure of themselves should should probably be questioned. At the same time, be aware of other people's weaknesses. Certainly vis-a-vis yourself. I mean, I know that I was a bit negative at the beginning of this piece on Aries, but I must emphasize that you are fundamentally very, very well placed, and sometimes you can be too strong. Particularly in a one-to-one situation, you can just give off a lot of energy, a lot of power, and some people just don't know what to make of you. And you shouldn't forget that Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Mars. Now, this Venus conjunct Mars can be useful. I mean, if you pull out all the stops, you can be very impressive, and you can encourage someone to get close to you. You've got to be a bit careful here. But Venus conjunct Mars is a bit of a two-edged sword. Yes, it can make you very attractive, but it can also put people off. So it's the difference between attraction and repulsion can be non-existent. Just the right move, the wrong move. So be very, very careful. And it almost seems like a random process, what you do. You could just make some small mistake and that could spoil everything. You get it right and you can get really close to someone. So I would have said this is a time, Aries, where you have to be very careful with relationships. I mean, relationships can really work for you, but provided you're properly prepared. But, with Moon moving into Virgo, I think that you do understand the importance of preparation, and you can get things right. And so relationships are an area of your life that could go wrong, but if you really think it through and you try to be as sensitive as possible, then I think that you can make a good impression. Taurus. Well, the big aspect today is a conjunction between the Sun and Venus. And, this conjunction between the Sun and Venus is perhaps controversial. I say controversial because there are two different views on, how it might work. So because this conjunction is so close, it could be argued that it is a cazimi conjunction. Cazimi means that the Sun is within 17 arc minutes of Venus. So an arc minute, you have 360 degrees in a circle, and each degree is divided into 60 minutes. And so 17 arc minutes is a very small angle. But today there is this cazimi conjunction. And so there are these two concepts in astrology, being combust and being cazimi. So a planet is combust when it's within 8 degrees of the Sun, particularly if it's in the same sign as the Sun, which Venus is. And you could say that Venus is heavily combust. And so that might mean that you are just overwhelmed, that this is a particularly difficult and, I won't say unlucky time for you, but there are just huge things around you which it's difficult for you to make sense of, but they are important. And it might be, for example, that you're overwhelmed by the power of the past, or overwhelmed by what's going on in your home, or there could be family members who are just too influential. So it could really be very difficult. On the other hand, if you take the cazimi view, you are very much strengthened by this conjunction by the Sun, because it is so close. And when you've got the Sun so close, it's like the Sun and the Venus are on the same wavelength. and I kind of see it in some, you might see it in some kind of sort of science fiction kind of way, that you are walking through flames, and normally the flames would burn you up, but it's because you are on exactly the same wavelength as the flames, whatever the flames are, maybe your enemies or the difficulties of the world, but you're on the same wavelength, and while you're on the same wavelength, you're fine. But as soon as the sun moves outside that 17 arc-minute orb, I mean, there are different views about what cazimi is, you're on a different wavelength and things go suddenly very wrong. So if you take that view, it's a kind of rather fantastic view, you might say that today you're able to move into an area that is normally quite dangerous, but at some level you are protected because you're on the same wavelength as everything. And when I say dangerous, I don't mean really dangerous. I mean, I don't literally mean putting yourself in physical danger, but it might be that you can temporarily deal with unfamiliar grounding, or in terms of your family, maybe there's a very difficult familial situation that normally you would not be able to deal with, but perhaps you can deal with it because Venus is conjunct the sun, or maybe a difficult, something to do with your homes. It's a difficult situation, but you have this temporary strength because Venus is conjunct the sun. So I'm not necessarily encouraging you to experiment. You've got to trust your judgment, and I'm not saying what the right answer is. And maybe you've just got to embrace the symbolism here and do what you feel is right. Also, Moon is moving into Virgo, and Moon is moving out of Leo into Virgo. I think Taurus, in a general sense, that's probably something good, because Taurus, Virgo is an earth sign, Taurus is an earth sign, so when the moon moves into Virgo, you're kind of feeling better about yourself, and you're not quite so insular, and maybe you recognize that you genuinely have got something important to contribute. And of course, when the moon moves into Virgo, it will soon make aspects to all the Capricorn planets. So I do think that over the next 24 hours, 48 hours, you are going to be able to get into your stride. And if there's something you want to do that is a fundamental expression of who you are, then I think you should get on with it. And it is okay to be an individual. Gemini. Well, we do have some sign changes. Well, one sign change. We have got the moon moving out of Leo and into Virgo. So, with that happening, Virgo, it is a planet that's ruled by Mercury. Virgo is a sign that is ruled by Mercury, and it has a relationship with you, this sign Virgo, but it's not necessarily a comfortable relationship. And with the moon moving into Virgo, you might feel that you just have to slow down. You don't really want to slow down, but it has to happen anyway. And so as things slow down, you find that you're not quite so happy about things, and it's perhaps because you're feeling just bored, and there are things you kind of have to engage with, but you don't really want to engage with, and at the same time there are also things you'd like to be doing and you feel you can't do them. And so there's a possibility that you might feel ever so slightly frustrated. And these frustrations might sort of manifest in different ways. Just getting annoyed with yourself, getting annoyed with other people. Yeah, there are lots of things you want to do, but you can't do them. And you might find yourself also, Gemini, thinking about things just in the worst possible light, asking yourself, well, what can go wrong, rather than what can go right. because there doesn't seem to be any encouragement, any enthusiasm, or at least much enthusiasm. And so, this negativity, might be with you for much of the day. And as soon as you start thinking about things in a negative way, well, things might move from bad to worse. So to an extent, Gemini, your attitude is important. I mean, it's important as far as possible for you to have quite a positive attitude and to think about all the ways in which things could go right. But, that is going to be, hard work. So what do you do? I think what you do is you show some self-discipline. And that's not necessarily easy, because when I say self-discipline, what you're really doing is you're disciplining your mind. And what you need to think about is what needs to be done in the future. It's quite easy for Geminis to focus on the past, on the mistakes of the past, and on the constraints of the past. But instead, you need to think about, what needs to be done today. You might not want to do it. Okay, you might want to do it, but you might not be in the mood. And so possibly, Gemini, over the course of the day, you're going to have to do things that you don't really want to do. It might seem to be a chore, even though it's important. You kind of are just not interested, and you're distracted. That means that, Gemini, it is a time when I think that self-discipline could be very important. Cancer. The main aspect today is Sun conjunct Venus, and this conjunction between the Sun and Venus takes place in Capricorn, your opposite sign. Of course, we do have a lot of planets in Capricorn. We've got 4 planets in this sign, and so this Sun-Venus conjunction, may say something about other people and how other people are behaving. And when you've got Sun conjunct Venus, it might be that something or someone is hidden in a way. They're not necessarily revealing themselves, and so with Sun-Venus conjunction, with this Sun-Venus conjunction, you shouldn't necessarily take people at face value. If they say something about themselves, don't necessarily believe them. Doesn't mean they're lying. There perhaps is just this general tendency to keep quiet, not say more not for you to keep quiet necessarily. I don't know, not at all, but for other people to keep quiet. And you shouldn't assume that you know someone completely, particularly if they're a stranger or you're just getting to know them, because something is being hidden. And, being a Cancer, perhaps you're able to work that out. So if the truth is being hidden, then I think you're going to know about it, pretty quickly. Now, at the same time as this, we have got the Moon moving into Virgo. And I think that Moon moving into Virgo is not a bad thing. It's a sign that where the Moon works pretty well, particularly at night. Remember, the Moon is the night ruler of the Earth signs, so maybe that means Cancer, you're going to be on better form during the hours of darkness. And so the Moon it's starting to make a trine to Mercury. And so with the Moon starting to make a trine to Mercury, as the day progresses, as you move into Wednesday, you're going to have more to say, and you're not going to just say things just for the sake of it. I think that you're able to work out what is happening around you. You're able to understand what other people are doing, what other people are offering, and yes, what other people are hiding. So if you make the effort, Cancer, you will be able to get a clear picture of what is happening. But just because you understand something doesn't mean you should reveal it. There's a strong case, Cancer, for keeping your insights to yourself. You might have completely understood someone. You might have understood that someone is being deceptive. Does that mean you should take action on as a result of this insight? Probably not. Maybe it's a question of building up the evidence, and you're gathering some of the evidence today, but maybe you have to wait until Wednesday, which is until tomorrow, before you really understand something in its entirety. So it's perhaps not a time for doing anything that is dramatic, even if that's the way you feel. I think that in general, tomorrow, Wednesday, is just much more active. That's when the moon in Virgo starts to make real contact, with those Capricorn planets, and that's perhaps a time when you can really start to express yourself, and perhaps also to express your doubts if you have them. Leo. Sun is conjunct Venus. That's important for you because, of course, the Sun is your ruler. And when we talk about the Sun conjunct Venus, we think about poor Venus. Venus being really under a lot of pressure because the Sun is right next to it. The Sun is blotting it out. But we have to look at it from the Sun's perspective as well, especially if we're dealing with Leo. So it may be that this Sun conjunct Venus is a two-way aspect. When I say a two-way aspect, I mean maybe Venus is damaged by the Sun, but the Sun is strengthened by Venus. Because Venus is a benefic. It's a fortunate planet. And so when it's conjunct the Sun, that does say something about you. You benefit from Venus's influence. So I think that this Sun-Venus conjunction, as far as you're concerned, is potentially a good thing. It makes you sort of more sensitive, sort of more charming in an understated way. And we shouldn't forget that the Sun is not just conjunct Venus, it is conjunct Mars. Sun is still on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So it does mean that potentially, Leo, you are able to really carry yourself quite well. People can like you. Not necessarily because you are super charming, but because you get things right, or at least you can get things right. And that is the nature of these 4 planets in Capricorn. These 4 planets in Capricorn, 4 planets in an Earth sign. This allows you to just understand what is required of you. It might be difficult, it might be hard work, but Leo, you're able to make the preparations, and you're able to think ahead. In a slow kind of way. When I say think ahead, I don't mean that necessarily in a way that is insightful. But if you're honest with yourself, Leo, you just know what's expected of you. And if you stick to the rules, if you stick to your basic understanding of what makes people tick, then I can't see any problems. But it is important. It is important to go through the rules. It's important to act in a way that is entirely proper. But, being a Leo, that's often something you can do. Leo is a fixed sign, and it has a certain regality to it, doesn't it? Sun in Leo. And part of the royalness of Leo is perhaps understanding protocol. And even humble people who aren't royal family or VIPs, there's always a protocol. And because you know the protocol, and perhaps you know the changing protocols, you can really conduct yourself very well, not just in a face-to-face way, but in terms of, what you're writing, what you're saying. So, for example, if you're writing a letter or an email to someone, you address someone properly. You don't necessarily call them by their first name, particularly if the email or letter is important and you're dealing with someone who is supposedly worthy of respect. You use their correct titles. It might seem a bit weird to do that in the modern day and age, but there's always, a place for using the correct titles, and not, if you're using one of those languages that makes a distinction between, what is it, what is it, the plural you and the singular you, and you have to use you in the correct way. I don't know what the precise term is. You'll know about all of that. I don't know, it's like French or German or Russian, one of those languages. You'll get it right. And again, it goes back to protocol, and so your understanding of protocol and how to behave, it should really, see you through, over the course of the day and into tomorrow. And additionally, you know what's important for you. And we've got the moon moving into Virgo, moving out of Leo. So moon in Leo, okay, moon might be it's going to be in Leo all day if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, your experience might be different from, say, if you're in California. But in Australia, New Zealand, well, you've got moon trine Chiron is the main aspect. That's a slightly different thing, moon trine Chiron. Yeah, you understand protocol perhaps, but with moon trine Chiron, you're also wanting to show how different you are. You don't want to just do what's expected of you. But if you are breaking protocol and you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, you will know what you're doing. And if you're in the Americas, well, you've got the moon moving into Virgo today, and certainly last half of the day you've got moon moving into Virgo, and that means, Leo, that you can just decide, what is important, and perhaps with that moon in Virgo, you will understand that the financial side of things does matter. But at the same time, the moon is moving towards a conjunction of the south node. So you know that money matters, but you know also that you have to be very careful about how you deal with it. And you also have to be careful how you mention it. Sometimes money should not be discussed, even though it's the elephant in the room. It's something that really is important, but you don't really feel that it is the right time to bring it up. But that's something you might just have to work out over the course of the day. Virgo, the moon is changing sign. It's moving out of Leo and it is moving into Virgo, which is your sign. So with the moon moving into Virgo, that means that we're going to have 5 personal planets in Earth signs. The personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, all in Earth signs. 4 of them in Capricorn, and the moon in Virgo. Also got the South Node in Virgo, and we've got Uranus in Virgo as well. So things do become very earthy, and from a Virgo perspective, I think that that feels good. It feels that things are happening and you're starting to understand, what's going on. And perhaps one reason you're able to understand what's happening is perhaps because things maybe are slowing down. It seems that they're slowing down. You're having enough time to really understand what's happening. It's not just a sort of a rush, a blur across your vision. It's a time when you can focus, when you can concentrate, and you see things. You don't just see the big picture. You can see the details, and that can be a good thing, and it can be a bad thing. The bad side is that, well, Moon in Virgo conjunct the South Node. Okay, this conjunct South Node is it's going to be exact tomorrow, but still, the Moon and the South Node are in the same sign, and you have to be just ever so slightly careful that you don't push things too far. Just because you see things and you even understand things, it doesn't mean to say that you should change your direction or be too honest about what you see. You perhaps feel that it is time to discuss your worries and your concerns. If you've got a genuine worry and concern, fine, you're going to be very good at it. But if it's something that is ever so slightly trivial, or perhaps it can wait until a later date, then maybe you should leave it for another time. And also, Virgo, there is some possibility that you do concentrate on the negative. You can concentrate on all sorts of things. You can focus on whatever you like, but for some reason you might be thinking about how things could go wrong or how bad things are. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're feeling bad about it yourself. You just want to talk about it. You want to talk about the bad things that are happening around us. And in extreme situations, Virgo, you might be quite interested in matters of death and destruction and decay, and it just might be something that you just kind of think about, and you maybe even want to talk about. And the question is, how do people respond to it? And it's also about your thoughts. Your thoughts will maybe naturally sort of gravitate towards the end of a matter, but naturally gravitate towards destruction and dissolution. I mean, that is inevitable. That is part of the cycle. But you've got to think about the whole cycle, not just the end of the cycle. So if you do find yourself thinking about things in a negative way, perhaps you should, ask yourself, what is actually going on? Is it helpful? And how much do you reveal? Do you want to dump your negativity onto other people? I mean, maybe you don't. But on a positive note, where there is a concern about death and destruction, there is the seeds of creativity. I mean, I think that perhaps the concept that everything is finite, that nothing lasts forever, is almost a wellspring of creativity. If we think we've got all the time in the world, then things get sloppy and we don't give our creativity enough time. But what spurs creativity is very often this idea that there isn't enough time, that we can't wait forever, and we need to sort of darkly work at what is most important to us with a certain intensity. And Virgo, I do think that is something that you can very much do, because remember, Virgo, this is a time where you can be creative. Certainly over the next couple of weeks, while you've got all these planets in Capricorn, really make the most of it. And by thinking that there is a time limit, I'm not talking about your own mortality or anything like that. I'm just saying your awareness that things eventually come to an end may spur you to take action, may spur you to even make a fool of yourself, because you have to. You can't wait. And sometimes, it is a good thing to be impatient. But on the other hand, you have to bear in mind what I said about the moon being conjunct the south node. There is inevitably, with moon conjuncts the south node, a certain selfishness there, putting your own priorities first. Maybe that's what you should do. With the south node, it's very easy to be negative about the south node, thinking that we should avoid the south node. But in reality, it's not necessarily true. Sometimes the south node just represents an area that is easy. And if something is easy, then we should go for it. If it feels natural, maybe we shouldn't complain. We shouldn't try too hard to do the right thing, to do something that is difficult. Yeah, if it comes naturally, then go with it. But again, you don't want to completely ignore other people, because other people do matter and other people's sensibilities do matter in most cases. Though maybe, Virgo, you would argue that you have to be negative, you have to point out the downside of things, and you have to almost perhaps point out the finiteness of everything, that nothing lasts forever. Perhaps you have to point this out to people. Perhaps people are being complacent. Perhaps people need to be disturbed. Well, maybe that's the case, Virgo, in which case, hopefully you'll do a good job. But yeah, awareness is important, and maybe there are certain situations where you have to make other people aware, even if in the process you undermine their happiness and complacency. Libra. The big aspect today is a conjunction between the Sun and Venus. And this Sun-Venus conjunction has been brewing for some time, but now it is exact. So, of course, Venus is your ruler, and if it's conjunct the Sun, how is that actually going to be felt? I mean, it could be the case that the Sun conjunct Venus is something, quite overwhelming. The Sun represents something that is bigger than you, something that you don't fully understand, and it could really make it difficult for you to act freely. And is it? And then there's also a question, is it inevitable? Now, I did say, over the last few days, I was kind of warning you that you perhaps should be very wary of other people, particularly if other people, there are some ties of loyalty and attachment there. I'm not talking about family or partners or people very close to you or spouses. I'm talking about more sort of other people in general. And those other people, they could take up a lot of your time, and they could disturb your inner equilibrium. And so maybe you should perhaps cut quite a solitary path for yourself, because if you're alone or you're just surrounded by people you absolutely know and trust, then I don't think that the Sun-Venus conjunction, is going to be quite so bad. Though, is it going to be bad? I mean, that is the question, because this Sun-Venus conjunction is so close that it is cazimi. And a cazimi conjunction is when the Sun and the Venus are 17 arc minutes apart, which is nothing. So there are 36 degrees, and it's 360 degrees in a circle. There are 60 arc minutes in each degree. So 17 degrees. Yeah, it's nothing. It's very close. And so when the Sun is so close to Venus, according to the cazimi theory, that means that you are actually strengthened. So it may be a day when you are really strong. And I think that this is the case. This can be the case, provided you are involved in things that you are very, very familiar with. It's not a time for experimentation. Absolutely not. But if you're doing something that you just know like the back of your hand, then you can do an amazing job. So it's not a day when you should be looking for surprises. It's not a day that you should be doing anything new. But instead, just do something that is brilliant, that you don't have to look up, you don't have to ask questions about. You feel no vulnerability. It's just completely you. So if you've got any area of expertise, give it everything. Give it absolutely everything. And yeah, I think that you can do a really good job. And at the same time, Libra, you are, I think, able to look after yourself. I mean, I did suggest that, maybe certain other people could undermine you. They could sort of prevent you from seeing the full picture. But you do know how to look after yourself. You can be quite assertive. You can get angry. There's nothing wrong with being angry. And so if you want to show your anger, or rather, if you feel you need to show your anger and your independence, then Libra, I think this is something that you are, very much going to be able to do. But it's all got to be on your terms. It really is that kind of day. Particularly once the moon moves into Virgo. Okay, so the moon moves into Virgo. Okay, if you're in the Americas, maybe late morning. Depends whereabouts in the Americas. Maybe early afternoon if you're in Brazil or Chile or somewhere. But once the moon does move into Virgo, of course, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, that's not until tomorrow. But when the moon does move into Virgo, really focus on yourself and Don't feel that you have to be doing anything. And, when you are alone, when you are doing things according to your own rules and there are no disturbances, then I think that you can do a really good job. Scorpio. At the moment, Scorpio, we have a sign change from the moon. We have the moon moving out of out of Leo and moving into Virgo. So with the moon moving into Virgo, you probably won't really feel that sign change until tomorrow. But there could just be a certain change of emphasis. Perhaps you won't be quite so concerned with your ambitions. It is a time when Scorpios, do need to think about what they need to do, what they want to do, and hopefully you've had a degree of success. But now you're able to think about perhaps other things. The moon, when it moves into Virgo, it's moving into a mutable sign. And so you're starting to think about other possibilities, and you're perhaps going to be more open-minded, just thinking about different possibilities. It's a new year, and it's not just a new year. It was almost a week ago now. It's what is it? The 6th. So we're well into the year now. It's a new week. So perhaps you've seen one set of possibilities, and now you want to be aware of a new set of possibilities. So do consider alternatives, and at the same time be aware that there is a big conjunction forming. This big conjunction involving Sun, Venus, and Mars. Sun is getting really close to Mars. Venus is getting really close to Mars, and today there's a Sun-Venus conjunction. So this conjunction, I do think it gives you a lot of power. It gives you a great ability to express who you are, in no uncertain terms. But sometimes you can go too far. You might express yourself in a way that might get a sort of a negative reaction, and you might come over as being perhaps a difficult but determined person. And with the Sun making a conjunction to Venus, it's really difficult to know what to say about this Sun-Venus conjunction. It's tempting to be negative about it, to say, well, Sun is conjunct Venus, so that might indicate that there is, someone out there who is, under the weather, is under pressure as well. Venus is ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign. So if it's conjunct the Sun, that might indicate that someone really might be struggling. They can't express themselves, they can't be themselves, and maybe you need to accept that. And there is a place here, Scorpio, for just being aware of other people's weaknesses in the same way that you should be aware of your own strengths. And by taking into account of other people's shortcomings, that is going to be, I think, welcome. But there's another way of looking at this Sun-Venus conjunction. It is Cazimi. It is 17. It's 17 arc. This within 17 arc minutes, and so this Cazimi conjunction may give you the ability to really project yourself in a way that you can really benefit from. Now, I have said that the moon moving into Virgo might make you just ever so slightly less ambitious. You might be thinking about other things, other possibilities. But on the other hand, the Sun-Venus conjunction could actually give quite a boost to your ambitions. And maybe it's like, because you're less ambitious, you can actually achieve more. Sometimes if one is too ambitious, or one doesn't get much done, one doesn't accomplish one's goals because one is just too focused, one is too single-minded. And maybe this Sun-Venus with this Sun-Venus conjunction, something might appear, something might happen, which you can really take advantage of. And so what might it be? It might actually be what someone does. Someone may make an offer. Someone might have an idea. Someone might suggest a possibility. So that's something to look out for. And it's not just about career or business, it just could be about anything. So people have got something to offer. And it's therefore important, Scorpio, that you give everyone a chance. Yeah, there is a danger that you are so obsessed with yourself that no one gets a word in edgeways. So do take a step back, Scorpio. Give people a chance. And if you give people a chance, something might happen. You might hear something. You might be told something. Someone might make an offer which might be interesting. So perhaps the key to today is how you treat other people and how much space you give them. Yeah, some people might not have anything to contribute, but do you know? You don't know. And so it is important to give everyone a chance. Sagittarius. I think Sagittarius, you are beginning to wonder, what is next? What is next in terms of the future? I mean, you've been kind of thinking about the future, but now it might seem just more urgent, and that something has to be done. And it sort of takes place over the course of the day, and it's into tomorrow, and it's something that you just can't avoid. And out of the chaos of the new year, because New Year is very often a chaotic time, but out of the chaos of the new year, something is starting to form, and ideas are starting to form, and you're feeling the impulse to really make something happen, make something real. And so you're no longer satisfied with second best, and it's not easy though. I mean, part of you, Sagittarius, just wants to retreat. Still, you have been feeling this impulse to retreat, over the last few weeks, and it's still there. But I think that right now, you kind of want more, and so do try your hardest. You can actually see this from the chart. So if you look at the chart, I'm looking at the moon. Look at how alone the moon is. The moon is, you've got all these planets on at the bottom of the chart, because I've set this chart with 0 degrees Sagittarius on the left, but the moon is kind of on its own, trying to carve out its own path, and that's what's happening, Sagittarius. Maybe you feel ever so slightly alone. It's not always easy. In Vedic astrology, I believe the moon would be regarded as Kamadruma yoga, and so when you've got Kamadruma yoga, it's when the moon is not in the same sign as any other planet, and it's not adjacent to any other planet as well, except the south node. I think that with Kamadruma yoga, you do include the south node. And it's not just about you, Sagittarius. You with this Kamadruma yoga, it's perhaps other people as well. Everyone has their own solitary path, and that's how we all feel. But as far as you're concerned, and what your solitary path is, your solitary path might be to make something happen. Even if no one else is interested, Sagittarius, you want to just you want to make progress, and I think that is something that is very important to you. And if, Sagittarius, anything is in your way, then slowly but surely you are going to crank up the energy, and you're going to escalate. And I think today, and perhaps tomorrow as well, you're going to be quite good at escalating. Again, if things aren't going your way, you put energy into something, you still get blocked. You put more energy, and before you know it, you are a force of nature. Yes. And so do not underestimate yourself. Other people might underestimate you as well, but if you start to really want something to happen, then I think actually, Sagittarius, you can make it happen. So Sagittarius, maybe you're going to be the surprise of the day. Capricorn. Well, we've talked a lot about the fact that we have 4 planets in Capricorn. I mean, I've gone on about that, on and on and on. Maybe I'm sounding rather boring. But now we've got the moon moving into Virgo. Okay, so moon moves into Virgo, well, around lunchtime if you're in the Americas, I think. No, late morning, depends where you are. If you're in California, then that would be... I think that would be sort of just before 9 in the morning if you're in California. So it depends where you are. If you're in Europe, it would be late afternoon. So or early evening. But the moon moving into sorry, did I say it's moon moving into Sagittarius? No, I'm talking about moon moving into Virgo. That's moon moving into an earth sign. And so moon moving into an earth sign, given we've already got 4 planets in Capricorn, that's quite something. And so today and certainly tomorrow, there's a real earth emphasis. And tomorrow, it's kind of more of the same, except more so. So Capricorn, this is a time, I think, that you are very much at one with everything, at least on an elemental level. You just feel comfortable. You know what you're doing. You know where you're going. You know how to handle yourself. And it, in a way, it doesn't really get much better than this. Certainly from an elemental perspective, having 5 personal planets in Earth signs, plus Uranus, plus the South Node, so that does give you, real power, and you should be quite sort of exploratory. You shouldn't feel that there's only one way of getting things done. You can do things in lots of different ways, and you can certainly be versatile. And with the moon moving into Virgo, you have the opportunity to experiment with different strategies. And just because you haven't done something before doesn't mean to say it's not going to work. I mean, it could actually work extremely well, and your power is possibly intensified by the fact that we have a conjunction between the Sun and Venus, exact conjunction between the Sun and Venus. Now, this Sun-Venus conjunction takes place in Capricorn. It's your sign, and it's Cazimi. So when we say Cazimi, that means that it's within 17 arc minutes. Now, normally conjunctions with the Sun are unfortunate, but when they're really close, they can perhaps be okay. I mean, more than okay, maybe. And so with this Sun-Venus conjunction right in your sign, I'm thinking that Capricorn, you're fundamentally going to have a very, very clear sense of what you should be doing and what needs to be done, and it comes from a different place. It comes from something that is really fundamental to yourself. It's almost quite emotional, and if you have that feeling, a feeling that you know where you're going, you know where it's all leading. And if you go with that, then Capricorn, I think that you can really, set yourself up for a successful few days. Okay, so today is the start, particularly now that the moon is moving through Virgo, and you can explore, you can discover things that are new and different, but it's always for a reason, and the reason is, Capricorn. You know what that reason is. You know that there is something that is incredibly important to you, and if you really focus on it with laser beam precision, then I'm confident, Capricorn, that you can really make things happen. And so today, tomorrow, Capricorn, I think overall that you are in a very strong position. So do make the most of it. Aquarius. We now have a situation, Aquarius, where there are no planets in fire signs. There are about to be no planets in fire signs. It depends where you are. But the moon is moving out of Leo. It's moving into Virgo, and because of that, at least on the surface, there could be a certain emptiness, just a feeling that things are not there, that things are not moving, that things are not happening. And at first sight, it seems rather boring, and you might not be quite sure what to do, not quite sure what you're supposed to do. And I would suggest that you perhaps accept that situation. You don't feel that there's necessarily anything you can do about it. It's not a day for creating dramatic change. I mean, you might like to create dramatic change, and yeah, sure, if you try really hard and you make an effort, sure, you can have an explosive impact. But just because it's an explosive impact, how long does an explosion last for? Probably a split second, and once it's done, and you're back to where you started. So perhaps be accepting, and also be aware that if you want something to happen, then you can't do it all by yourself. Maybe you need some outside help. There is a conjunction between the Sun and Venus, and this Sun-Venus conjunction is probably more about another person rather than you yourself. And so it just could be that there is another person who has the ideas, who has the dynamism, who can help you see things through to the next stage, if that's what you want. But fundamentally, I don't think that's anything you should necessarily be counting on. And instead, Aquarius, it perhaps should just be a day for reflection. Particularly once the moon moves into Virgo. Once the moon moves into Virgo, certainly today. I mean, tomorrow the moon in Virgo does make some aspects. It makes aspects to Capricorn planets, but today moon in Virgo isn't doing very much. And so just accept, Aquarius, that maybe one thing is starting to come to an end, and the new, whatever is new, hasn't really started yet. And so, is there really absolutely anything that needs to be done? Well, it's always good to keep in mind what you're going for, what you're looking for in the future. The sun may be making a conjunction to Venus, but it's also making a conjunction to Mars, and that sun conjunct Mars can be certainly is a very fiery aspect, and it's possible that deep down, over the course of the day, just when nothing is happening, when everything seems completely boring, this Sun-Mars conjunction starts to manifest, but at quite a deep level. And slowly but surely, Aquarius, you just realize what you have to do. And there's nothing you have to do immediately, but some kind of ambition, some kind of feeling for the future starts to form, and then you can watch it form. And then you can start to create plans for yourself. And and don't forget, very soon, just a couple of weeks, we're going to have planets moving into Aquarius. The Aquarius season is not far away, so that is certainly something to be looking forward to. Pisces. The moon is starting to move into Virgo, and of course Virgo is your opposite sign. And so with the moon moving into Virgo, it might happen this morning if you're for example on the West Coast in California. It might happen tomorrow if you're in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand. But when the moon moves into Virgo, uh, there is a change. You perhaps have an opportunity to think about all the things that might be influencing you for better or for worse. You would like to be independent, but sometimes there are external events as well as people that you just have to take into account. But just because you have to take something into account doesn't mean that you should be ruled by it. And I think that's quite important. You need, with the moon in Virgo, as the moon moves into Virgo, you need to make a special effort to look after yourself and to make sure that you safeguard your independence. It's easy with the moon making a conjunction to the south node to just give in to external forces, do what other people say, keep your opinions to yourself. Perhaps it's just too easy. It's a line of least resistance, but it's not a path that you should necessarily be following. I mean, more than that, it's not a path you should be following. And instead, it is a time to be thinking about yourself, but also understanding other people, understanding the kind of pressures that they're able to present. If you ignore another person, pretend they don't exist, that doesn't mean to say they go away. I mean, they're still there. They're still very present, and they can influence you in many ways, and they can mess you up in many ways. And the less conscious you are of how people can mess you up, well, the more they're going to mess you up. So it is important, Pisces, that you really do, you think about that, and you think about how you could be compromised. But need you be compromised? Well, not really. I think that fundamentally, Pisces, if you really think that something is important, then you are definitely able to look after yourself. And in fact, you can have a very powerful influence. You can have a transformative influence, especially once you're annoyed. Once you feel that something is no good, that it has to be got rid of, you can move quickly, and you can have quite a dramatic impact, which might well take everyone by surprise. They're assuming that you're one thing, and you suddenly become something else, and you really start to use your power. So, I mean, it may be that you can keep your power to yourself if you have no obstacles, if everyone stays out of your way. But if there is a conflict, then I think that in most cases you'll come out the winner. But yeah, you have to be selfish. You have to be ready to sort of get angry, show your anger, but in a controlled way. That shouldn't be a problem. Saturn is in Pisces, it's in your sign. Saturn sort of structures your approach. So Pisces, you understand what can hold you back. You understand the role that other people have on you. But in the end, I do really think that you're able to look after yourself. So those were my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 54, which is the marrying maiden. So the marrying maiden indicates a situation where someone appears to be very keen to have a connection, to have a union. The symbolism here is of a young woman who is keen to get married, overly keen to get married. She doesn't care about the normal procedures, decorum. She just wants to get married. And this might indicate a situation where someone is pressuring us, perhaps to sign an agreement or to give something away, or just to become part of our life. And it seems very straightforward. If someone is so keen, well, maybe it's easy to be flattered, but there is a kind of a warning here. It's all a bit too hasty, and the advice here is to perhaps withdraw and not to feel you have to get overly connected with one other person, especially if that other person seems to be in too much of a hurry. If they say, you've got to do it today, you've got to sign on a dotted line today, or you'll miss your chance, tomorrow it'll be too late. No, you can always wait until tomorrow. And I think that is perhaps an important message with this hexagram. And, this hexagram, the Marrying Maiden, it does have two moving lines. And, the second line moves. And the second line talks about a woman with one eye. I think it's a woman with one eye. She can see, but she can't see very clearly. And so with this one eye, it's possible that she can't actually understand the nature of a relationship clearly. Perhaps she's being let down. Perhaps things aren't working out very well. And she might be in a relationship, she might be connected with someone, but at the same time, she feels herself to be estranged. And perhaps the advice here is to say, well, look, this is a situation where you can kind of see another person, but you can't see them very clearly. So are you then in a position to make a judgment? And the answer is probably not. So if you are being pushed to do something, whatever it is, particularly if it's by another person, the question is, can you actually trust that other person? And the answer might be no. And it could work the other way. You might mistrust that person, and again, that might be a mistake, because you are from a social perspective, you're only looking at things with one eye. You haven't got two eyes to see it. Your visual perception is diminished, and so do be very careful here. And then the third line moves, and the third line is talking about perhaps an unsatisfactory relationship. If you want to be with someone or be part of something, it needn't be a relationship, it can be a job, something you're looking for. Yeah, you can maybe, but what do you have to give away? You're not going to be given the central position that you're really looking for. You might find that you're on the periphery. So, for example, if you're applying for a job today, maybe you get a job and you think you're going to get a kind of job and it's going to be the right kind of job. And when you actually do the job, it's going to be disappointing. Or if you're trying to get any position, any form of supposed status boosting activity, you think it's going to boost your status, there's always a disappointment, and you might just find yourself unexpectedly sidelined. So relationships overall could be disappointing, and relationships of all kinds, and other people cannot be trusted. And that's not just about anything personal. It can be something commercial, or you're buying something, or you're being pressurized to do something, and don't give in to pressure. I think that is important. And people here who are in a hurry really should be avoided. Now, I've got two moving lines. That move means that we move to a second hexagram, and we move to hexagram 55, which is abundance. Not such a bad hexagram. It does mean that, if we are patient and if we keep some distance from other people and we realize that they could let us down, then in the end today things might come together. We might find that things aren't so bad, but maybe this is a short-term situation. So perhaps we give in to someone, or we trust someone, and straight away things seem okay. It's not so bad. But when we think about abundance, there's this warning that abundance doesn't last forever. I think it says something like, be like don't be sad, be like the midday sun. We have this moment where everything comes together, and then it goes into decline. And that might be what happens if we accept people at their word, if we trust someone. To begin with, things are fine. Maybe things are more than fine. We're starting to think by the end of the day, well, what was there to worry about? Everything was okay. But no, things are not necessarily okay. And what starts well doesn't necessarily end well. And maybe this is a message of a hexagram, and it goes, not this, just this hexagram, but the previous hexagram, a marrying maiden. So I go back to what I say, right at the beginning of this I Ching reading. It's not a good time to be trusting people. At first, it might seem the right thing to do, but I think in the end, it's probably a mistake. So that's I Ching, and now I want to finish by looking at the Sun-Venus conjunction. I don't want to spend very long on it, and I want to, if possible, avoid talking about politics and current events. There's been so much going on over the last few days, indeed since the beginning of the year, that perhaps we need a break. So anyway, here is the chart for the Sun-Venus conjunction. So this the conjunction takes place on today, on January the 6th. And it's at 4:36 p.m. London time. So if you're in New York, that's sort of late morning. If you're in Australasia, that will be early tomorrow. So this Sun-Venus conjunction happens at 16 degrees 22 minutes Capricorn. And as I've been talking about over the course of a video in my interpretations of the 12 signs, there is this controversy about whether or not it's fortunate, because it is a cazimi conjunction. In other words, it's right up close, and there is this theory that Venus is strengthened by the Sun if it's totally close. I mean, normally when a planet gets too close to the Sun, it is combusted. And yeah, Venus is combust. It's completely combust. But maybe at that moment of exactitude, the Sun and the Venus are on the same wavelength. Maybe there's just clarity. And I think that perhaps is the logic for the cazimi conjunction, being fortunate. So when you've got the planets coming into, when you've got the Sun and Venus coming together, you can see that the Venus is getting burnt up. But at that precise moment when they are together, they're on the same wavelength and they're resonating at the same frequency. So perhaps if they're resonating at the same frequency, yeah, it may be the case that the Sun, can't be hurt, Venus can't be hurt by the Sun. And additionally, we've got Sun-Venus conjunction. In some ways, does that emphasize Venus, or does that damage Venus? Maybe you could argue that moment when that Sun-Venus conjunction happens, Venus isn't in the sky. It's gone. It disappears. At least from a geocentric point of view. Remember, heliocentrically, a Sun-Venus conjunction is the same as an Earth-Venus opposition. But it's kind of the same thing, because if you think about it, if you look at the heliocentric chart, you have got the Sun obviously in the middle of the solar system, and you've got the Sun, and you've got Earth and Venus on either side. So that is the point, that you really can't see Venus because the Sun is in the way. So looking at it from an astronomical point of view, you could say, well, how is this fortunate when Venus is just gone? It's been obliterated. The Venus principle has disappeared. Venus principle, that we might see that in a literal way. I mean, maybe it's bad for women. Maybe a woman who was prominent has disappeared. I mean, I don't know how prominent Brigitte Bardot was. I mean, Brigitte Bardot, of course, was in her sort of heyday in the sort of 1960s, but it's kind of interesting as the Sun-Venus conjunction became exact. This 50s, 60s sex symbol, very, very, very much in some people's eyes, certainly in French eyes, perhaps an an epitome of the feminine, it sort of disappeared. So that is a way in which Sun-Venus conjunction could work, and maybe you need to look at women in public life with this Sun-Venus conjunction, and what they're doing and the kind of challenges that they are having. Because one woman in public life is, of course, the acting president of Venezuela. This is what's her name, Delcy Rodriguez, who I talked about in my video for Monday. So if you're a woman in power and you've got the Sun-Venus conjunction, that really might be something you have to think about. It might make things difficult. It does certainly put you under a lot of pressure. So as far as the specifics of this Sun-Venus conjunction, well, it's probably a good idea to look at the midpoints. Put this on the 90-degree dial. So if we put the Sun-Venus conjunction on the 90-degree, so there is the Sun-Venus conjunction. You can see that it's there. It's of course they're exactly together. So the question is, what midpoints are the Sun and Venus on together? And the two things that stand out are, well, it's on the Neptune-Pluto midpoint. It's quite closely on the Neptune-Pluto midpoint. The Neptune-Pluto midpoint is at 114 Pisces. So that means that it is going to be, what's that? Sesqui 114. That's going to be sesquiquadrate. That's semi-square. The Neptune-Pluto midpoint is also on the Pluto-Aries midpoint. So there's a lot of Pluto here. So what we've got is, there is Pluto and there is Neptune on the Aries point. So this is it's quite a complicated influence. Having Neptune-Pluto. Remember, Neptune-Pluto are in permanent sextile. I mean, I don't think much is said about that sextile anymore, because we're so used to that Neptune-Pluto sextile that it kind of defines a generation, doesn't it? Defines a huge generation of people. I mean, when you think about generations, you think about people born a few years apart, maybe people, the Neptune in Pisces generation or the Neptune in Aries generation. But, I was born with a Neptune-Pluto sextile. You were born with a Neptune-Pluto sextile. Neptune and Pluto are still in sextile. It just doesn't go away. And so maybe that Neptune-Pluto defines this huge generation that all of us are part of. With Neptune-Pluto sextile, Neptune and Pluto will be in different signs, but perhaps this is what binds us as a generation. Pretty much everyone living on this planet has this Neptune-Pluto sextile. And okay, I don't know what happens before. Okay, maybe the Neptune-Pluto sextile, people who are really old, but But for most of us, the Neptune-Pluto sextile is very much here, and Venus is on the Neptune-Pluto sextile. So maybe this Sun-Venus conjunction sort of affects us all, and it affects the confusion that we live with this Sun-Venus conjunction. It just might be a confusing influence, and also, it's Pluto it hits the Pluto Aries midpoint as well. So Pluto Aries, it just brings it all home about how complicated things are, and how does this relate to Sun-Venus? Sun-Venus, something perhaps is being blotted out here. I really think so. I think we can't see Venus. We can't see the connectedness. We should be able to see the connectedness. I mean, I've talked about the connectedness that the vast majority of us all have with this Neptune-Pluto sextile, but it's sometimes hard to find. And so, those are a few thoughts about what this Sun-Venus conjunction is about. I think perhaps we have to be careful about doing anything connected with Venus while this Sun-Venus conjunction is exact. maybe that means one shouldn't have cosmetic surgery. I mean, that means surgery which has been elected. Of course, if you need surgery, you need surgery. If you need plastic surgery, it's urgent. But if it's not time sensitive, if you don't have to have cosmetic surgery with Sun Venus conjunction, I'd say probably it's a good idea not to have it. Or anything to do with art, decoration, beauty. It's a very clear form of beauty. It's maybe a temporary form of beauty. And you could say that when Sun is Venus conjunct Venus, it sort of blots out one's conception of beauty. Maybe one thinks something looks beautiful at the time, but then after the event, not so good. But Venus has been in a worse position. It's not like Venus is in Scorpio retrograde combust. It's not quite that bad. And we should remember something about that, about the Cazimi conjunction. Maybe the Sun-Venus conjunction is about a vision of beauty, where everything is absolutely in the right place, where everything is perfect, if that is at all possible. So, there is an alternative view to it. But, I'm just feeling that one should be somewhat suspicious of this concept of Cazimi. And of course, one can use a Cazimi in horary astrology. And how does one look at Cazimi in terms of judging a question or an event? I still think it's problematic. And I just wanted to finish by just looking at some examples of people who have Sun-Venus conjunction. I mean, why not? So one example of someone who has a Sun-Venus conjunction is Bill Burroughs, the writer of Naked Lunch. And, when you're dealing with a man who has a Sun-Venus conjunction, there is a possibility that someone who has a Sun-Venus conjunction, because Venus is a universal significator of women, so if someone has a Sun-Venus conjunction, that may say something about how they treat women. And of course, with Bill Burroughs, we know that he shot his wife in Mexico City. He was doing the William Tell routine, and I think he put a glass on her head and tried to shoot the glass and killed her, by mistake. So that might be one way of looking at Sun-Venus conjunction. This is a Sun-Venus conjunction in Aquarius, so maybe there may be times when he mistreated women, and clearly in this case he killed his wife. He got away with it as well. I think that he escaped Mexico City, or maybe he bought people off, whatever he did, but there was no lasting after effects. And I think I saw an interview with Allen Ginsberg talking about how this was a very important creative event for him. That's a very Sun-Venus thing. You completely ignore the woman who got killed. And Sun-Venus may say something about his harshness, and perhaps also his discipline. I mean, if you want to be a writer, you certainly have to be very disciplined. And someone else who's been associated with the death of a woman is Charles Manson. So Charles Manson, Sun-Venus conjunction in Scorpio, and okay, that may say something about him as a person, but of course he is associated with the death of Sharon Tate. I mean, that's what he is infamous for. When the Manson gang killed Sharon Tate in August 1969, he has a Sun-Venus conjunction, and that may say something also about a lack of compassion, or just so obsessed with himself and his own needs that he perhaps forgets the human dimension. So it's not necessarily something fortunate. And if you do have a Sun-Venus conjunction, it's possible that you might have a tragedy associated with a woman. And so if we look at the chart of Hunter Biden, Bill Biden, Joe Biden's son, he has a Sun-Venus conjunction in Aquarius, and that Sun-Venus conjunction may say something about his mother. I mean, Venus is a universal significator of women, Sun-Venus conjunction, and we know when he was very young, end of 1972, his mother died in died in a car crash, and not just his mother, but his sister as well. So he had this experience of two females dying, which I'm sure had an absolutely horrendous effect on his life. He also had a Mars-Uranus opposition in his chart. So that, of course, nothing to do with him. It's just something he was involved with. And I'm sure that did have a huge impact on him. And Christopher Hitchens, he has a Sun-Venus conjunction. Well, he's dead now, but Christopher Hitchens has an absolute load of planets in Aries, and he indeed had a Sun-Venus conjunction. I don't know how that Sun-Venus conjunction worked as far as I believe his mother committed suicide, actually. So that may say something about, am I right in saying, I think Christopher Hitchens' mother committed suicide? And so, again, going back to Hunter Biden, that may say something just about his experience of a woman, losing his mother, but also Sun-Venus conjunction with Mars as well says something about his intensity and the intensity of him being able to pursue an argument and being very good at arguing, just a pure Aries. But I wouldn't have said that is necessarily a Sun-Venus feature. I would have said that Sun-Venus conjunction in Christopher Hitchens' life just says perhaps just something about his past and something about his emotions that perhaps we don't really fully know about, on the surface. Now, two people who are born very close to one another who had a Sun-Venus conjunction are Oprah Winfrey on one hand. So Oprah Winfrey has Sun-Venus conjunction in Aquarius. Does that say something about what she had to deal with when she was young? I know she had a tough upbringing, and Sun-Venus, I don't know about how she was treated by men when she was very young. Maybe that says something. A woman with a Sun-Venus conjunction may be vulnerable to being mistreated by the men in her life, whether it's father, spouse, boyfriend, sons, whatever. So that is a way in which a Sun-Venus conjunction could work. Now, so she was born on just as in January 1954. Someone else who was also born in January 1954 is RFK. So RFK has a Sun-Venus conjunction. So he was born a bit earlier than Oprah Winfrey, about a few days earlier, actually just over a week earlier, but that Sun-Venus conjunction is not in Aquarius, it's in Capricorn, and I don't know what that. Of course, in his case, it wasn't his mother that got killed; it was his father, Bobby Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1968. I'm sure that had an emotional impact on him, and someone else kind of in the news is Tulsi Gabbard. Again, she's the National Intelligence Director, and she has Sun-Venus conjunction. I mean, she has a Sun-Venus conjunction like Christopher Hitchens. I mean, they both have Sun-Venus conjunctions. They both can be very good arguers. Of course, no one is as good as Christopher Hitchens, but Tulsi Gabbard was able to destroy Kamala Harris's attempt to get the Democrat nomination in not this time round, but the last time round. So that might be how Sun-Venus conjunction works. But there's perhaps a vulnerability to men and the influence of men, and perhaps men in the Democrat Party, maybe even men in the Republican Party. How does she feel about Trump? It does seem, in the light of what's going on in Venezuela, that Trump has kind of broken a campaign promise, a promise that both Tulsi Gabbard and RFK were very much connected with. This is the end of these forever wars, the end of the neocons. Perhaps Tulsi Gabbard trusted Trump, and maybe he's let her down, and maybe that's her Sun-Venus conjunction in action. And finally, there's our old friend Vladimir Zelensky. With Vladimir Zelensky, he has a Sun-Venus conjunction, and I think what is interesting about Vladimir Zelensky is that he has no water in his chart except for Uranus in Scorpio, and I obviously people have questioned my view, but I have my doubts about how much Zelensky can really read the room. Okay, sure, he's a comic. Was a comedian. To be a comedian, you've got to be able to read the room to some extent. But as president, does he really know what's going on? Does he know what's going on emotionally? Does he understand the dynamics going on around him? It's a dangerous position he's in. I mean, he's done very well. Maybe it's just his pure single-mindedness that's got him through. And that Sun-Venus conjunction is pretty single-minded. But at the same time, it seems likely to be a point where that Sun-Venus conjunction runs out of steam, and so I just get a feeling that in the end he's going to lose touch with what's going on. It's probably already happening, but he seems to be working on a different level. I don't think he's working on an emotional level, and I think having that Sun-Venus conjunction, that Venus is kind of blocked out, and that Venus, in the end, I think he's going to lose the rapport with the Ukrainian people. I mean, I'm sure it's already happening, probably big time, and that's perhaps why he's why he's starting to show dictatorial tendencies, why he's delaying an election. If everything was fine, he would have an election. He wouldn't come up with some excuse. Oh, but there's a war, we can't have an election. The United States had an election during the 1812 war against Britain. It had an election during the Second World War. So the United States had no problems having elections during the war. So why is Ukraine having these problems? Anyway, I think his Sun-Venus conjunction does manifest, and sometimes it's clear he doesn't read the room properly. I mean, the Europeans seem to be okay with him, but sometimes when he has to deals with Trump and leaders outside the Western alliance, it's often a real disaster. When he goes to Saudi Arabia or China, when he tries to deal with the Chinese or the Brazilians, it's often a disaster. And so perhaps with a Sun-Venus conjunction, he's very good at dealing with people on his team, but when he reaches out to other people and saying in his Christmas message that he wants Putin to die, that's not the way to do it, even if he does want Putin to die. So I think that Sun-Venus conjunction, I think in the end, is going to be part of his undoing. So anyway, those are a few thoughts on the Sun-Venus conjunction. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.